Dr. Hardin Shah. I'm immensely pleased to participate in this symposium, and my thanks are due to you and to the Secretary General, as well as Dr. Hemalata, Director of NIN, who has given me this platform to speak on Indian dietary guidelines and its implementation. May I have the first slide, please? We do know that food and water are hierarchical needs of almost all living beings on the earth. And if you look at the importance of food, in ancient Indian literature, second one, ancient Indian literature, it's evident that food and nutrition have been given a lot of importance. The third line, that is, he who takes food in proper measures, lives a long life and lives without disease and gets strength and alertness of mind. And it also speaks of a transgenerational nation of nutrition. His children are born healthy and without any deformity or disease. This is from the epic Mahabharata. And in fact, this is framed and kept in a nutrition museum at NIN. What is a healthy diet is extremely important for us to know because the dietary guidelines will depend on it. It sustains growth, development, cognition. Almost every organ in the body or system in the body is supported. It also is important to fight against infections and inflammations as well. Most chronic diseases have inflammation and maintains appropriate body weight and composition. It should provide non-glycemic carbohydrates, mainly the whole grains with fiber and other micronutrients, to prevent insulin resistance. And good quality proteins from legumes, pulses, lean meat and poultry, which has the capacity to decrease the GI. And good quality fat from low-fat dairy, nuts and seeds, and plant oils, which provide the unsaturated fats. Of course, one has to take plenty of vegetables and fruits to provide the micro and phytonutrients. We need to take only minimally processed foods and fortified foods when essential, and snack foods low in salt, sugar, and fat, and beverages in moderation, particularly sugar-sweetened beverages. Unhealthy diets are the risk factors for disease, disability, and death. Now, what are food-based dietary guidelines? Actually, the nutricentric RDA is being converted to food-based approaches because the common people will understand only the foods which they are taking, but not the nutrients, even though they know that the nutrients are present in the food. So we convert the nutricentric RDA into food-based approaches. It has to take into consideration public health issues, tradition and culture, socioeconomic status, environmental concern, and it should become the country's strategy to improve food and nutrition security, safety, and health. Unhealthy diets compromise economic status and impede development. Therefore, a food system approach from farm to fork is needed. Food is the strongest lever for nutrition and health. Now, there are several actors in the food-based dietary guidelines. It is a policy and programmatic education tool. It has the potential to guide policies and influence the food systems. So who are the actors or players or the stakeholders in this? You can see there are the multiple professionals are there from multiple disciplines. Then we have the key policy makers, government agencies, then agri-scientists and farmers because they have to grow what we need. And then we have educators, communicators, private sectors to prepare and process the foods, media personnel, consumers, NGOs. These are the various players who need to implement the dietary guidelines. It has to be coherently integrated into the national food nutrition, agriculture, trade, education, and health policies. Now, let's look at briefly the nutritional deficiency disorders. I'm sure all of you must have heard from our director earlier. We still have malnutrition in terms of low birth weight, stunting, wasting, and underweight. It has decreased over a period of time, but still we have a lot more undernutrition, particularly in children. And then we have a host of micronutrient deficiencies, iron deficiency, folate deficiency, B12, vitamin A, vitamin D, and zinc deficiency. This is the very recent report of a comprehensive national nutrition survey report from in 2016-18. Next slide, please. Now we have nutritional disorders in adults as well. We have anemia, chronic energy deficiency, but then we have high blood pressure, high blood sugar, overweight, and obesity. All of them are precursors of most of the NCDs, such as the cardiovascular diseases. 55.4 million people are there with the CVDs, of which IHD and strokes constitute about 24 and 7%. Diabetes is around 65 million people. Actually, this is 2017 report. Currently, it is around 75 million. And the COPDs are seen in 55 million people, and cancers in 2. So let's look at the change in the profile of the diseases or the epidemiological transition from 1990. The communicable maternal nutritional deficiencies from 60.9 has decreased to 30, whereas the NCDs have increased from 30 to 55.4. And if you look at these are the DALYs, and you look at the deaths, that also has behaved in a similar way, that 53.6% of communicable maternal neonatal nutritional disorders have decreased to 27.5, whereas the non-communicable disease have increased to 61.8. WHO estimated that a decrease in economic growth by 0.5% occurs for every 10% increase in NCD mortality. Therefore, this is an important point to remember while drawing up dietary guidelines. Globally, dietary risks are responsible for 11 million deaths and 255 million DALYs, of which greater than 50% of deaths and 66% of DALYs are due to increased sodium, decreased whole grains, and foods. This is extremely important. We look at the food data later in India. It exactly mimics this, and we take much less fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds, but more from refined grains. We do not take too much of whole grains. It contributes very little to the diet. And therefore, these things need to be modified. Next, please. Now, we had the very first dietary guideline in 1998. Actually, I became the director in 1997, and this was my first assignment to bring out a dietary guidelines for Indians. And so we had a working group consisting of senior scientists of NIN, a panel of experts representing diverse disciplines in the country. It's a transdisciplinary approach, that is agriculture scientists, technologists, public health scientists, and pediatricians, gynecologists. Everybody participated in this. And there were experts in cardiovascular diseases, diabetes, and cancer as well. The draft document was, of course, prepared by the senior scientists of NIN, circulated, and the comments incorporated into the very first volume. It was released during the 80th year of the Institute and 51 years of India's independence, and that's why it has that flag design. The second dietary guidelines, I was also the chairperson for this, was published in 2011. We had a food and nutrition exchange group of FAO at that time in India, where we used to exchange solutions. And they had some comments on the dietary guideline, and therefore we have incorporated all these into this, along with some comments from Dr. Anurag Kurpat. And you can get this on the website, which is indicated in the slide. Now, what are the dietary goals? Now I'm going to speak about the third volume, which is now being prepared. We are on the way, and we will be able to bring out the whole thing by end of the year. Some of the aspects I'm presenting here. The dietary goals essential for all age groups in India are ensuring state of positive health and optimal performance in populations, maintaining ideal body weight, achievement of adequacy of all nutrients, and prevention of deficiency diseases, ensuring adequate nutritional status of women of reproductive age and during pregnancy and lactation, achieving adequate birth weights and promotion of growth for infants, children, and adolescents to achieve their full genetic potential, and of course, prevention of chronic diet-related disorders, and ensuring good health and quality of life among the elderly. The diet, there are 15 guidelines totally. Now, I'm going to show only the guidelines and only one guideline in detail. We need to eat a variety of foods, wise choice to ensure a balanced diet, ensuring provision of extra food and healthcare to pregnant and lactating women, promoting exclusive breastfeeding for 6 months and encourage breastfeeding as long as one can, and feed home-based semi-solid foods to the infant after 6 months, and ensuring adequate and appropriate diets for children, adolescents, both in health and disease, and eating plenty of vegetables and fruits. And we also have a guideline for the fats, ensure moderate use of edible oils and animal foods, and use less of clarified butter and vanaspati, which consists of all saturated fats. Next, please. Avoiding overeating to prevent overweight and obesity, exercise regularly, restriction of salt intake to minimum. We have suggested around 5 grams actually. Maybe we need to decrease it further later. Ensure the use of safe and clean foods, and adopt right pre-cooking processes and appropriate cooking methods so that the nutrients are preserved and the food is safe to eat. And drink plenty of water, and take beverages, particularly sugar sweetened, in moderation. We need to minimize the use of processed foods rich in salt, sugar, and fat. This is more common in the urban than in the rural segments. Include micronutrient-rich foods in the diets of elderly people and enable them to be fit and active. Next slide, please. Now, every guideline follows this format. We have the guideline followed by the rationale, and then we have briefly, we give some important points followed by why, what, how, where, everything of the diets which we want people to consume. And in the end, we have points to remember, such as choosing a variety of foods for appropriate amounts, using a combination of whole grains, millets and greens, millets and grams and greens, preferring freshly available vegetables and fruits in plenty, locally available, and including in the diets foods of animal origin such as milk, eggs, and meat, particularly for pregnant, lactating women and for children who are growing. And adults should choose a low-fat, protein-rich food such as lean meat, fish, pulses, low-fat milk, nuts, and seeds. And develop healthy eating habits over a period of time, and be physically active and exercise regularly and move as much as you can. This is the format for all the guidelines, so I'm not going into the details of that. Let's look at the requisites for implementation. Political will, bureaucratic commitment, multiple intersectoral strategies are required. A central nodal agency should be there now. The Ministry of Women and Child Development is a central agency, and it has a national nutrition mission which sees to the convergence of all the national nutrition programs. We need to have favorable policies, increasing availability, accessibility, affordability. And for behavioral change communication, you need to change awareness of the people, attitudes of the people, so that they can practice appropriate diets. Consensus and synergy is required, and strong public-private partnership is also required. And food legislation and labeling is Food Safety Standards and Safety Authority of India oversees this. So a food systems approach from farm to fork is essential, and it should be a very cost-effective approach. Next, please. Now, what have been the initiatives taken to popularize food-based dietary guidelines in India as soon as the first volume was out? We sensitized the government officials involved in the implementation of nutritional activities to incorporate dietary guidelines in all programs and policies, circulate to all agencies. The nodal agencies, the Ministry of Women and Child Development, and they had lots of food and nutrition board officials whom we have trained in a 2-day workshop. And in all the professional societies, the dietary guidelines formed a part of their annual meetings. Then we had interpersonal communications, educational camps, a social platform for several groups of people as indicated here. This is to have a community mobilization. And we had the Educational Mass Media Research Center, where it holds countrywide class programs, and dietary guidelines were often talked about by many of the staff members of NIN in this center. We should have a wider community. We have been training women as well as the peripheral workers, grassroots workers and paramedical workers. Of course, press meetings and briefs are very common. Next, please. The important thing is we have prepared food guides, and this multi-pronged approach for communication, you need to change the behavior, but it needs a long-spanning multimedia approach. Otherwise, it's not easy to change the behavioral pattern. We also had social marketing. I'll present it in a minute from now. And you need to have appropriate advocacy and empower the people with dissemination. In the first book, we had steps to foundation to nutrition and health. What foods you can eat adequately, liberally, moderately, sparingly has been indicated. The same thing has been converted into a pyramid in the next one.
Sorry, Dr. Kamala, you have 2 minutes left.
Okay, sorry. The next slide, please. These food guides have been used, and we had used it in all social marketing strategies. And of course, currently, in a very recent What India Eats, we have given the My Plate recommendation, and we see the differences between urban and rural India. Next, please. We need to improve the diets in many respects, as indicated in the My Plate for the Day, released during the centenary celebrations of the NI. Next, please. Next, please. Now, even we have nutrition books in Braille for the visually challenged. Next, please. And an app which people can download and use it and get to know what calories they are taking, what micronutrients are taking. Next, please. I would like to end with the next, please. I would like to end with the 2 more slides. It's an evidence-based information is presented, and we should grow what we eat, process, preserve, package, and add value. Communicate and build awareness and reduce the diseases and reduce the healthcare costs. For this, scientists, society, private sector, policymakers must have shared goals to have positive desired impact on healthy diets. Next, please. Dr. Walter Willett from Eat Lancet Commission has very nicely described what we should be doing in future. That is, transformation to healthy diets by 2050 will require substantial dietary shifts. I've just quoted what he has said. Global consumption of fruits and vegetables and nuts and legumes have to double, and consumption of foods such as red meat and sugar have to be reduced by 50%. And a plant-based foods with fewer animal cells is more healthier and is also environmentally healthy. Next, please. So I would end the entire thing with hymn to the earth from Atharva Veda in India. This is invoking the goddess earth, and may this earth replete with seas, rivers, water sources, excellent food grains from agriculture, prolific vegetation, and abundant living creatures bestow upon us beneficent nutrition. Thank you very much, and I'm sorry to have exceeded by 2 minutes. Thank you.
So this slide shows today's content. And this also explains the first time the 1925. So in Japan, the concept of DRIs was first introduced in June 1999. Furthermore, in October 2004, a concept of DRIs was fully introduced to promote healthy individuals or groups, to promote voluntary effort to improve the nutritional intake of the people through their lives. Targeting first, maintain the health of people. Second, preventing lifestyle-related diseases. third, for the purpose of avoiding health problem due to insufficient intake or overdose, and standard of dietary intakes is Japanese dietary reference intakes 2005. In the 2005 edition, almost all the concept of Japanese dietary reference intakes were incorporated, and the tentative dietary goal for preventing lifestyle-related diseases was created as a unique index in Japan. We call the DG, dietary goal, tentative dietary goal. Since then, this concept has been inherited until the Japanese dietary reference intakes 2020 edition. The dietary reference intake of Japanese people has been reversed every 5 years by the Minister of Health, Labor and Welfare based on the Health Promotion Law. The latest version was announced in December 2019, last year. So this slide shows the trend in aging and the future estimates in Japan. As you know, as the total population decline and proportion of the elderly people aged 65 and over increased. By 2006-5, the aging rate will be about 1 in 2.6 people aged 65 and more over, and about 1 in 4 aged. And this shows changing the global aging rate. Red one is Japan. So in Asia, this is Japan. So compare the developed country, Japan aging rate are low, still the 1980, very low, but almost medium in the 1990. And now highest level in 2005, and then 2060 almost 40%. Japan aging population is progressing at unprecedented rate in the world. This slide shows a healthy life expectancy. So blue one is life expectancy, and red one is healthy life expectancy. So healthy life expectancy is a period of the time when there are no restriction on daily life. So in Japan, different between the life expectancy and healthy life expectancy. Male is about 9 years, and females about 12 years. So this is a basic concept of the dietary reference intakes of Japan. In formulating the dietary reference intake for Japanese people, DRI's 2020 edition, from the perspective of avoiding the nutrition-related decline in physical and metabolic functions, taking into account the future aging of the population and the increased number of people with diabetes and other diseases, in addition to maintaining and promoting health, preventing the onset, aggravation of lifestyle-related disease. It was decided to formulate it with view to preventing the undernutrition and frailty in the elderly. For this reason, we decided to harmonize with the various related disease guidelines. So this slide shows the outline of the DRI's 2020 version. So first one, based on the progress of the aging and with a view to preventing undernutrition and frailty of the elderly. Second, more detailed information on the elderly from policy perspective. So age classification was set. Third, evidence level was set for the target amount. Fourth, ingestion standard that were partially unset on children were set. Fifth, characteristic by the subject and relation between lifestyle-related disease and energy intake, energy and nutrient were constructed as part of each cell. So purpose of this, purpose and type of nutrient indicators. So energy body mass index was adopted as a reference of the balance of energy intake and consumption. The BMI characterized by this. And nutrient, it is composed of 5 indicators with 3 purposes. Especially it is composed their type of indicators aimed at avoiding the insufficient intake. Indicators aimed at avoiding health disorders due to overdose, and indicators aimed at preventing the onset of lifestyle-related diseases. In addition, nutrition for which intake standard can be set for purpose of preventing the aggravation of lifestyle-related disease and frailty, and shown separated from the amount for the purpose of preventing onset. Because this DG is originally prevention of lifestyle related diseases. So age category. So children was children. Sorry. Children aged 1 to 17 years old and adult aged 18 and over. Especially elderly people was 55 years old or older, and 2 categories, 65 to 74 years old and 75 years old or older. However, it is should be noticed that evidence for each age group in the elderly may not always be sufficient for some nutrients. So next, this slide overview of indicator. So energy indicator are explained already. And nutrient indicators consist of the following 5 indicators. First one, they estimate the average requirement, EAR, and recommended dietary allowance, RDA. Third, adequate intake, AI, and tolerable upper intake, UL. And last one, tentative dietary goal for preventing lifestyle-related disease, DG. This DGs, I want to explain the bit. So even if the basic principle of the target amount calculation method is not met, and standard is established if the importance of setting the target intake amounts are recognized in the nutrition policy. So nutrients for which DRIs can be set for the purpose of preventing the aggravation of the lifestyle-related disease and frailty should be set separately from the amount for the purpose of preventing the onset and should be included in nutrition footnote of each table of DRIs.
Sorry, Professor Kido.
Yes.
We have 3 more minutes.
3 more minutes. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. This is the data reference intake to establish the bound energy and proteins, social energy and nutrients. So these minerals and this slide application of data reference intake for PBCA cycle. This is a very important slide. So first, the data assessment first, and then plan to check act. Yes. And this is the last slide. So last slide and also same slide. So I emphasize in Japan, international Japanese aging population is progressing at the unprecedented rate. So under this conditions in Japan, healthy life expectancy extension plan was formulated with the aims of extending healthy life expectancy by 2040 for the both men and women by 3 years or more compared to 2060, and 75 years or older we promote individuals concern. So whether individuals or groups, correct dietary assessment is required for proper utilization of dietary reference index, but develop of dietary assessment methods suitable for utilize daily reference index and education and dissemination of dietary assessment method necessary and urgent issue. So finally, in futures, stakeholder in the field of policy, practice, and research education will be required to work together to tackle these issues. Thank you for attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, my thanks to Professor Ardincha and ISFAN for inviting me to this symposium. My task this afternoon is to describe the Philippine nutritional guidelines for Filipinos and its implementation, and then draw some conclusions and recommendations for the future. Next slide. For a bit of history, the first nutritional guidelines was formulated by the Food and Nutrition Research Institute, or FNRI, way back in 1990 with 5 nutritional recommendations. This was revised in 2000 with 10 recommendations, following the trend in nutrition and health problems at that time. The third edition, or the 2012 edition now, still has 10 messages, but with the addition of the corresponding rationale to emphasize the importance of the message. Next slide. The Philippine guidelines took a number of forms. A handbook embodying the 10 guidelines is useful as a reference to technical persons and professionals in teaching guidelines to the public. The other one, the second one, is the Daily Food Guide Pyramid, a simple pictorial food guide to further help the public in understanding and following the messages. And then we have, in recent years, a further addition, further simplification of the guidelines in the form of a food plate called Pinggang Pinoy, which illustrates the major components of the diet in recommended amounts. The National Nutrition Council translated this into 10 guidelines in Filipino and came out with what they call 10 commandments. Next slide. For formulating the guidelines, the FNRI took a simple process. First, a technical working group was formed by FNRI and composed of experts from different disciplines and agencies, aided by a project team of science research specialists from the Institute. The most important step, I think, was the extensive review of the current health and nutrition situation in the country at that time. Next slide, please. The review was mostly culled from recent national nutrition survey of FNRI. From the surveys, it was clear that malnutrition was still a problem in most parts of the Philippines, affecting practically all age groups. Underweight and especially stunting was highest among preschool children. Wasting was highest among infants, and a fourth of the elderly suffered from chronic energy deficiency. On the other hand, overweight and obesity was starting to show among adolescents, and in fact, among adults, almost a third of the adults are overweight or obese. Nutritional anemia was subclinical subclinical vitamin A deficiency, and iodine deficiency was also a significant problem. Next slide. The average household food consumption for dietary energy, as well as for micronutrients, were all below the recommended amounts. Exclusive breastfeeding was only practiced in 0 to 6-month infants only to the extent of 5.2%. Hypertension was found in 18% of adults. Almost 5% of adults were found to have high fasting blood glucose, and 18% had high total cholesterol level. Smoking among adolescents was as high as 7%, and almost half of the adults had low physical activity. Next slide. The 10 nutritional guidelines, as mentioned earlier, includes its own rationale to emphasize the importance of the message. The guideline starts with a brief introduction of its context, followed by the main body of the guideline, which explains what the guideline is all about, and the rationale and facts behind the message, and finally, the frequently asked questions and answers. The guideline ends with action points summarizing the recommendation on how to follow the message. Next slide. Message 1, eat a variety of foods to get nutrients needed by the body. Next slide, please. Message 2, breastfeed infants exclusively from birth up to 6 months, and then give appropriate complementary foods while continuing breastfeeding for 2 years and beyond for optimum growth and development. Next slide, please. Message 3, eat more vegetables and fruits every day to get the essential vitamins and minerals and fiber for regulation of body processes. Message 4, consume fish, lean meat, poultry, egg, dried beans or nuts daily for growth and repair of body tissues. Next slide. Message 5, consume milk and milk products and other calcium-rich foods, such as small fish and shellfish every day for healthy bones and teeth. Message 6, consume safe foods and water to prevent diarrhea and other food and waterborne diseases. Next slide, please. Message 7, use iodized salt to prevent iodine deficiency disorders. Next slide. Message 8, limit the intake of salty foods, fried foods, fatty and sugar-rich foods to prevent cardiovascular diseases. And then message 9. Next slide. Message 9, attain normal body weight through proper diet and moderate physical activity to maintain good health and help prevent obesity. Finally, message 10, be physically active, make healthy food choices, manage stress, avoid alcoholic beverages, and do not smoke to avoid lifestyle-related non-communicable diseases. Next slide. So those were the 10 guidelines. Now, this was translated in a way by the Food and Nutrition Research Institute in what is now called the Daily Food Guide Pyramid, a simple pictorial guide that graphically translates the guidelines into a single pictorial illustration. It consists of 5 levels, one of which is broken to 2 boxes, each containing the foods included in each level. The size and arrangement of the level from the bottom to top depicts the relative amounts of food recommended for that level. Later, two lower levels were added to form the base of the pyramid: water and beverages, and exercise, personal and environmental hygiene. Next slide, please. The first level of the guideline, or the food guide pyramid, from the bottom on the main pyramid, includes cereals and tubers. The second level includes fruits and vegetables and is divided into two boxes: the green leafy and yellow vegetables and other fruits and vegetables, to give variety to the meal and additional fiber to the meal. The third level consists of milk and milk products and is separated from other protein-rich foods in the next level to emphasize the importance of milk. The fourth level concludes the common protein-rich foods, such as fish, meat, poultry, egg, dried beans, and nuts. And finally, the fifth level at the top includes sugar and sweets and fats and oils intended to be taken with the least amount. Next slide. Still later, the FNRI developed further pyramids for different age groups, from preschoolers to the elderly, indicating the recommended daily amounts of each for each level that was determined from the recommended energy and nutrient intake of FNRI. Next slide, please. Another form which the FBDG took is so-called Pinggang Pinoy. Even more recently, the FNRI developed a more simple guideline in the form of a food plate. The food plate illustrates the major components of the daily diet, each occupying the recommended proportions in a food plate. Cereals and carbohydrate-rich foods and vegetables occupy more than half of the plate, and the fruits and protein-rich foods the smaller portion. Again, a glass of water is added in the side to promote proper hydration. Next slide. Again, the first pyramid for adults was expanded by FNRI to different pyramids for different age groups with corresponding recommended amounts for each age group of the food plate. Next slide, please. And now for implementation of the Philippine food guide, food-based pyramid, guidelines. Armed with all these tools, the National Nutrition Council and all its regional offices throughout the Philippines led the implementation of a nationwide information campaign. Local nutrition committees from the regions down to the villages or barangays throughout the country carried out the campaign in their areas with the help of the so-called mother volunteers in the villages called barangay nutrition scholars. Person-to-person communication through schools, mothers' classes, daycare centers, etc., all help in delivering the message. Next slide. Yeah. The implementation of the Philippine FBDG was also, of course, carried out through the print media, through posters, buntings, leaflets, newspapers, magazines, and so on. And all these helped spread the messages of the nutritional guidelines. Radio and television were used maximally in the form of talk shows and interviews in Manila and in the regions. Next slide. The radio and television series hosted by a popular comedian calling himself Moises and centering around the graphic, the 10 commandments became very popular. The 10 commandments, meaning the 10 commandments for proper eating, is a translation of the 10 nutritional guidelines for Filipinos inscribed in 2 pieces of bread, looking like the tablet of the 10 commandments handed down by Moses. Next slide. Assessment and evaluation, of the information campaign in the Philippines is difficult to combine. In 2017, Lopez Madrid and Acuin et al. Published their study on awareness and adherence to the food-based dietary guidelines. The results showed the low nationwide reach and awareness of the 4 guidelines among almost 1,000 household meal planners nationwide. The meal planners, however, were most aware of the food guide pyramid and the 10 commandments.
Sorry.
The most adhered to message was limit intake of salt, fried, and fatty foods. And the authors concluded that there is a need to strengthen and harmonize nutrition efforts among agencies concerned in nutrition in disseminating the guidelines.
Sorry, Dr.
Next.
Florentino. You have 2 more minutes.
In summary,
Okay.
the various forms of the guidelines have been developed by the FNRI and the National Nutrition Council, differing in targets and complexity. The handbook is most useful as a reference for technical persons and professionals. The food guide pyramid and Pinggang Pinoy and the 10 commandments are most useful for teachers and communicators as tools. However, it appears that public awareness and adherence to the guidelines are still limited, thus requiring a more extensive, coordinated and intensive dissemination. Next slide. To maximize effectiveness of the guidelines, we should pay closer attention to 3 elements: the message, the medium, and the target. Continuing monitoring and periodic assessment of the implementation of the guidelines are needed in reformulating this message, improving the reach of the message, of the targets, and meticulously studying the targets to improve adherence. Strengthening the school food policies is very important, including the policy of marketing commercial food products. This is needed to improve the quality of food that is consumed by the children while in school and in the home. In addition, integrating the guidelines in the curriculum of formal education, both elementary and high school, will go a long way in improving nutrition habits and practices of the school children that will be carried all the way to adulthood. And finally, with the rapid advancement of nutrition and science and technology, since its formulation in 2012, I think it's best to review the current guidelines in order to incorporate new knowledge and recommendations, considering the broad range of the audience from policymakers and planners all the way to the implementers in the field. Thank you very much.
So everyone is keeping healthy, I hope.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, maybe I can try and do my slide. Is it okay?
Okay, in the process now.
Sorry for the injury time, yeah? extra 1 minute, yeah, Mr. Chairman. Okay. Okay. That's okay, it's coming. So my presentation is based on the work under the Southeast Asia Public Health Nutrition Network. So I will first share a little bit on the, yes, this is the title. I've been tasked by the president of the Federation of Asian Nutrition Societies, Professor Hadin Shah, to speak about the food-based dietary guidelines in Southeast Asian countries, look at the differences and the similarities. And we just heard from Professor Florentino, very detailed about Philippines, and also heard from India, Professor Kamala. So under the South Asia Public Health Nutrition Network, if you permit me, 2 slides on this network. Next slide, please. So the network, so this is what I will be talking about, a bit about the background of the SEA-PHN network, a little introduction about how we started the work, the background, why we started the work, the methodology, how we did this review, and most of the presentation will be about the results. The 6 dietary guidelines in Southeast Asia that we reviewed. Then there's a comparison of different key messages in the countries, comparison of the scientific rationale by these countries. Then I'll share with you the pictorial guides of these countries. Each country has a different pictorial guide. Then also the plates adopted by the different countries. Then just one last slide, sharing my thoughts on how we should move forward in these food-based dietary guidelines. Next slide, please. So the Southeast Asia Public Health Nutrition Network is a collaboration of 5 nutrition societies. From my left, you have Pergizi Pangan, then Nutrition Society of Malaysia. We have Nutrition Foundation of the Philippines, represented by Dr. Florentino. Then we have Nutrition Association of Thailand, president now is Professor Nalini. We have Vietnam Nutrition Association, president now is Professor Hop. Then these are 5 nutrition societies together. We think as collaboratively, the nutrition societies can contribute much more towards the improvement of public health nutrition in the region. And very importantly, we believe in public-private partnership. And we have fortunately 3 corporate companies who believe in our vision, in our objectives, in promoting public health nutrition. And these are Benio Institute, DuPont Nutrition and Biosciences, and also PepsiCo. So this public-private partnership is the way to go in bringing about differences in public health nutrition in the region. Next slide, please. So this slide very quickly summarizes the activities of the SEA-PHN network. We have regular activities to share and exchange views on happenings in the public health nutrition scene in the region. We have a website. We have on the bottom, we organized the first public health nutrition conference in the region. We developed a nutrition module for teaching school nutrition, good nutrition key to healthy children. Then on the bottom right, we compiled and reviewed the National Plans of Action for Nutrition. Then on the top right, we also reviewed the food-based dietary guidelines of 6 countries in the region. And this is what I'll be talking about. So let's focus on a review of the food-based dietary guidelines in 6 countries. Next slide, please. So we do not need to emphasize furthermore on the importance of FBDGs. And so the purpose of this review is to compare and see the differences and similarities of FBDGs, to look at how each country approach FBDGs, how each country provide the rationale, the scientific evidence for the key messages that they provide, so that this compilation, this review, serve as a useful reference to countries which are reviewing or updating their FBDGs, or for countries in ASEAN who do not yet have FBDGs. And there are 4 more countries who do not yet have a formal FBDG in English language. Next slide, please. So we compile all the key messages of the countries. We list out all the 17, we found that there are 17 key messages. We look at the rationale, how each country approach the key message. Rational meaning, why do we recommend lowering fat intake? Why do we recommend monitoring body weight regularly? And then we look at the pictorial guide, visual guide, the country proposed to guide the consumer in making food choices. Then we look at the food plate. We look at the concept, how each country approached the food visual food guide, and as well as a food plate. Let's move on to look at the results. Next slide, please. So this is a compilation of the key messages from the 6 countries. And on the third column, you see the years which the FPDG were published. And on the right-hand side, you can see the number of key messages. And Dr. Florentino just mentioned to us that Philippines has 10 key messages, Malaysia now has 14, and Professor Ismail will tell you that we now the new FPDG in 2020 will have 15 key messages. We are nearly finishing the FPDG 2020. So next slide, please. And by the way, I checked with all the countries, the 6 countries, 5 countries, and the FPDGs, as I listed in the last slide, they all still in use in these countries, and Malaysia is just almost finishing their new dietary guideline 2020. So next slide, please. So this review on the dietary guidelines have been published by the SEA-PHN network in the Malaysian Journal of Nutrition as a supplement in the Malaysian Journal of Nutrition. It's free to download if you have interest to look at the details of the messages that I present today, the rationale of each country, very detailed. We have already presented everything in this review as a supplement in the MJN, Malaysian Journal of Nutrition. Next slide, please. So very quickly, I listed down all the 17 key messages, and the tick means that the country has these key messages. If you look across the row, variety of foods in all the 6 countries, and so fruits and vegetables, salt, these 6 key messages in this slide adopted by all the 6 countries. They all have ticks in this. Next slide, you see some variations. For example, fish, lean meat, and so on. Singapore does not have that. And for example, cereals and grains, Philippines does not have that specifically, although it's embedded in other messages. Vietnam does not have that. If you go to the bottom row, personal hygiene, you can see that only Indonesia has that. Breakfast, only Indonesia has that as a key message within their dietary guidelines. I must move on quickly to the next slide. And just a summary of the 17 key messages. I think we can say that there are more similarities than differences in the key messages. For example, you saw that 6 of the 17 key messages were adopted by all the 6 countries. For example, eat a variety of fruits and vegetables, salt, fats and oil, sugar, healthy body weight. And 12 of the 17 key messages were adopted by 4 out of the 6 countries. And only 2 messages were in 1 country, and that is Indonesia. So I see there are more similarities and differences. Then if you look at the wordings, if you go to the supplement that we have, the wordings were very similar, just differences in 1 or 2 keywords. For example, people say, eat a variety of foods. 1 country may say, enjoy a variety of foods. That kind of very minor differences. And if we look at the scientific rationale, which we list in detail in the supplement, the scientific rationale provided by the countries are rather similar as well. For example, why do you need to limit fat and oil intake? Of course, in relation to overweight, obesity, and linked to diabetes, to heart disease, and so on. So there are more similarities than differences. Next slide, please. So let's now look at the pictorial guides. All the 6 countries have different pictorial guides I share with you. And but they're all based on the same principle that Professor Florentino mentioned just now. The shape of the pyramid, eat more at the bottom of the pyramid and goes up, eat less and less as you go up the pyramid. The concept is the same, the principle is the same, the concept of proportionality is the same. So most pyramids, most food guides have 4 to 6 levels, although Vietnam has a bit more. And the food groups within the food pyramid are very similar. So again, there are more similarities in the pictorial visual guides amongst the countries rather than differences. Next slide, please. I share with you some detail. For example, some of the pyramids, some of the pictorial guides talk about quantitative recommendations. For example, number of servings are given there. In other food guides, pictorial guides, they mention amounts, servings, as well as good words like eat more, eat moderately. That kinds of guides are given. And in terms of other additional messages, Indonesia and Philippines provided other messages. So when we look at the food guides now, pictorial guides now, you can see what I mean by other messages within the food guides. Next slide, please. Next series of slides will show you. So this is the very interesting tumpeng. I hope I pronounce it correctly, of Indonesian, very typical. Tumpeng, sorry.
Yeah,
Tumpeng. Yeah, Prof. Hadinsha did mention that. So you can see that the concept's the same, yeah, like a pyramid. And then you can see around the tumpeng, there are exercise there, for example, drink water there, for example, personal hygiene there. So next guide, please. Next slide, please. You can see the Malaysian pyramid. There are servings number, servings mentioned on the side, and the concept is still the same. Next slide. This is from the Philippines that Professor Florentino showed you just now. The concept is the same. Food groups are very similar. Next, please. And Philippines has got several other pyramids to share with different different age groups of people. Next, please. So now you see Singapore pyramid is very similar. Next, please. The nutrition flag of the Thailand. Very innovative way, but it's still a pyramid, but it's called inverted flag. The concept's the same. The food groups are the same. Next slide, please. So this is a Vietnam food pyramid. I got only 3 more minutes left. Let's go on to the next slide. And so this slide shows you the food plate. So Professor Florentino mentioned just now that many countries now adopt food plates as a visual guide. Food pyramid gives us a guide on the daily intake. There are different food groups to choose from and how much to choose from different food groups. Whereas a plate gives a guide on each meal intake. For example, looking at it at lunch, how much food should how much rice should I have inside? How much veggies and fruits? How much meat and similar foods should I have on the plate? So different countries have adopted slightly different plates, but the concept is again the same. You will notice that they emphasize a lot eating more of fruits and vegetables. Half the plate must come from fruits and vegetables. So again, there are more similarities than differences in the food plate recommended by the countries. Next slide, please.
Conclusion. Okay.
Yeah, this is my last slide.
Okay.
And my last slide. I have 2 more minutes. Yeah. So the key messages reviewed are based on the prevailing nutrition issues. You will notice that the countries talk about reducing fats and oil intake, maintaining ideal body weight, cutting down on salt, on sugar, and so on, because NCDs are prevailing in this region. So all the countries have recognized this and geared the FBDG towards preventing these diseases. So I find that there are several common key messages in these countries, and there are general similarities because the nutrition issues in this region are very similar. Next slide, please. Sorry, next point. So there's potential for collaboration amongst the countries. So it makes sense for SEA-PHN network to go together, to group together, and together combat public health nutrition issues in this region. And that again emphasizes the point that we need to work together, not in isolation in different countries, because there are so much similarities amongst the different countries. So the scientific rationale in these countries are very similar, and they are all countries attempt to give evidence-based recommendations, and we all attempt to give sound advice to the population, and hope that there's one common advice to the people, that everybody give the same message. Dietitians, doctors, nutritionists, everybody give the same message. I think it's very important to talk about promoting understanding of these FBDGs. It's very nice to do these FBDGs, review it every 10 years, every 5 years, every year, but it's no use if they are not promoted. A lot of emphasis needs to be given to how people understand these messages, how people use these messages. I think Dr. Florentino has very eloquently put the importance of this in his last slide. And we all should look at that last slide again and work together towards promoting. We all have a role to play to promoting understanding of FBDG towards the prevention of NCDs in this region. Thank you for listening.
Okay, Dr. T, you still have 30 seconds.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.